Hello and welcome back to another episode of What Do People Do podcast. I'm Leo.
I'm Eddie.
I'm Charlie.
And today we've got a very special guest with us. If you'd like to introduce yourself, give us your name, your age and kind of what you do if you've got a title.
Yeah, gosh, age. I'm James McMillan. I'm 38, 39 this year, getting close to that big 40.
Oh no.
I know, it's terrible. And I am co-founder and CEO of a business called My Nexus. And I am also a kind of just all-round entrepreneur, business advisor, consultant.
I think this is a good podcast, especially for you because you're quite interested in the entrepreneurial side of things. I think if for a bit of background, me and Eddie were in healthcare, we're both physios.
Oh, fantastic.
Charlie did business at uni and I think his passion is a bit more entrepreneurialism and a bit more of that side of things. So I think we'll learn quite a lot from you today, hopefully.
Entrepreneurialism always sounds a bit niche or like very business specific, but I think actually, but my career and the skills that I've learned can be applicable to lots of things. Yeah. So hopefully it'll be useful to everyone.
Brilliant.
I think some people don't like the term entrepreneur, they prefer like founder or, do you know what I mean? I think it feels like there's a lot of pressure behind it, doesn't it?
Yeah, in particular, I don't know what it is at the moment. There seems to be a lot of entrepreneur has become almost a lifestyle goal. A bit like being famous or being a sports personality. People think, oh, I'm going to become an entrepreneur and then fly my G6 around. And actually, I hate it because I don't like to badge myself in that way. Yeah.
So we normally start a podcast in a similar way where we kind of take the guests back to when they were either just starting or finishing school and kind of deciding what they wanted to do with the rest of their lives. Did you have any idea?
It's really difficult because I think when I was younger, the only thing I can ever really remember wanting to do particularly was I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to be an actor, really? I wanted to be in the theatre. I loved the stage. I loved singing and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's really hard because I think that when you are at school, like no one really knows what they want to do. Yeah. And I sort of, fell into accountancy, in a roundabout way. And I had this really funny conversation actually in that interview. I remember it very clearly because I was sat with kind of an accountant and then someone from HR, and they asked me the question. They said, why do you want to be an accountant? And I said, well, I don't really. So I just went, like, I'm doing it because it's a qualification. And I just said, when you're 10, you want to be a fireman, a rock star, a sports personality. It was like something of that ilk. I was like, no one at 10 says, I want to be an accountant. And the woman looked straight back at me and just went, oh, I did.
Oh, really?
And I was like, well, there's always one.
Well, and you got the job?
Yeah. I think they just thought I was so honest.
Fair enough.
He's very straightforward, this guy.
You're an honest guy, you'll be honest with the numbers as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it just because you were good at maths or what made you go into accounting, obviously, when you left school?
No, so accountancy was a funny thing for me. So I left school and I was reasonably academic, right? Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate that doing sort of study came naturally to me. Yeah. And so I did very well at school. I got really good grades. And I think because of that, I was sort of taught to be an all-rounder. It was like, just give everything 100% effort. Mm-hmm. And that actually was sort of bad because I ended up coming out of school going, I don't really know what I'm good at or what I like or what I want to do.
Bit good at everything.
Right. And I've just been sort of programmed to just give it 100% even if you don't really like it. So it was like, well, some of these grades I'm getting good grades at, but I don't really like it very much. Just trying to work through it. So actually when I chose a university degree, I started doing genetics, and that was because I liked biology and I thought, genetics is fun. And I started the course and realized very quickly, I don't want to be a scientist. Lab reports are boring. This is really intense. Like I was doing like 36-hour weeks at uni and it was 10-week terms. It was really heavy going. And I was like, I'm not going to stick at this. No. I'm very quick.
So did you do a year or did you drop out halfway through? So you did your first year?
Saw the year out. Right. And sort of halfway through had the very difficult conversation with my parents and said, I'm quite unhappy. I don't really know what I want to do. And to be fair, they were pretty good. I think they held their tongue and said, okay, well, do what you think is right. And I said, right, I'm going to take a year off. So I didn't quit. I took a leave of absence because I thought that was a good way to sort of I guess, defer decision making because I was like, I'm not really sure. And then I did a myriad of jobs in that time. And I always loved working. I worked since I was sort of 13, 14. And I ended up getting this job for Louis Vuitton, which was very fancy. I had no idea what they did or who they were, but I just rocked up one day and handed my CV in and said, I fancy working here. And then I ended up going back to uni doing business. And so actually accountancy, which was on my do not do list, it was sounded like something that was really dull, wasn't interesting. A friend of mine who I'd met at York University doing genetics had ended up being an accountant, and I thought, well, if you've done it, then maybe I would dislike it as much.
So when did you finish studying then? Because if you've gone to uni for 1 year, taken a year out, and then gone to uni to do business again, which I assume was 3 years, and then done your accountancy exams on top of that. Yeah. How old were you when you started uni and when you finished?
Yeah, so I was probably, I guess, because I'm an old baby as well, right? So I'm an October birthday, so one of the oldest in my year.
Okay.
So by the time I was doing business, it was basically the equivalent of taking like 2 gap years.
Okay.
So I wasn't too far away from everyone else, but that was really advantageous to me because I'd already done the first year in uni.
Yeah, they're more mature.
I knew what the pitfalls were, and I know as much as they will say things like, listen, your first year doesn't really count, it doesn't, it's not scored. Actually it is, because if you end up getting your degree profiled, which is what happened to me, they look at your past history, they look at what your attainment could be. And so I kind of very smartly and strategically went in with a slightly different mindset of actually the first year should be easy and it gets progressively harder. And therefore, if I get higher marks now, that shows the level of my capability. Right. So if I don't do so well later or I struggle, then they'll look across it and go, well, but the realism is he performs at this level. Yeah. And so I scraped my first class degree.
Where did you go to uni?
So I went to Manchester Metropolitan
University. Okay, right. And are you from Manchester?
No, so I'm from the northwest. Really, I grew up in the Lake District. So lovely country childhood.
Lots of walks.
No, because when you live there, you don't do it. You like stay as far away from the tourists as possible. Yeah. So I grew up in the Lakes, but we had family in Liverpool, Manchester, and so I kind of wanted to be in the region, but just far enough away from home.
And then, so how long were you an accountant for then?
So I qualified from university in 2008, which feels like an awful long time ago now. And obviously went straight into a kind of a grad scheme with an accountancy firm. I didn't realise that everyone else had been applying for jobs like in the final year. It just completely bypassed me. So I suddenly thought, I better get some paid work, and do something. And so I did the accountancy it took me 4 years to qualify. So I failed a few exams, had some scary moments where I was almost sacked.
Oh, really?
For not passing
the exams. Is it a tough exam, that chartership?
Yeah, it is. And there's something like 16 you end up doing over the course of the 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's very intense. You go and study for, a couple of weeks at a time, you're out of work. But then in between times, you're also doing a full-time job. And I'd actually got a job based out of one of the smallest offices in the accountancy firm, which was in Chester. Yeah. And I loved it from there, but it meant I was also driving into North Wales. So some days I was driving 4 hours back and forth between clients and trying to study. Yeah. And I'm a conscientious person, so I wanted to do well at work. And so the study didn't always match up to what I needed to do. And I failed one of my first exams by like 1 mark. And that should have been a flat out, like, you're fired.
Really?
Right. And I was very fortunate that the office managing partner really fought for me. And so they kept me on. So I'm forever in her debt. she was the person who started my career, really.
I think it's so tough, isn't it, with these kind of jobs like accountancy, where you have to be chartered really to kind of make it up in the world of accountancy, and you're expected to work full time whilst doing these studies. My girlfriend's a surveyor; she's kind of doing the same thing, a chartership for that. So she's having to travel to Liverpool, but also kind of revise every evening. for this exam that's kind of make or break for it. It seems like your colleagues are like,
they don't tell her when it is either, do they?
She just found out it's in 3 weeks, but like, you don't have much notice.
No.
And it's, I think it's a lot of pressure, especially when that young age, you're just getting used to the job, and everyone's like, you need to go for your chartership.
I cried when I qualified. Like, it was sort of one of those where, you know, when you get into it, like there are rules around how many times you can fail an exam and that sort of stuff. And so, you know, one of the problems I'd had was I've been very close a couple of times to kind of, you know, nudging one of those rules and then just pulling it back. And I failed my final case study, which is, it's a massive exam. It's such a big piece of work. And the second time I did it, I remember very, very clearly, I was on holiday with a friend of mine. I was sat on the beach and they text you your results. And they come through at 5 o'clock, and so I was sat just watching the phone. Rocket. And my friend was just badgering me all day, going like, "What's wrong with you? Like, why are you so uptight?" I was like, "This is the rest of my life I'm with here, you know." And then the text came through and said, "You know, you've passed." I was like, in the relief. And he's like, "People are looking, man. Like, calm down." Like,
I think it's so crazy because everyone, when they're doing these things, are like stuck in this bubble that this is the only thing that matters in life. But like, if you look at yourself at that moment, that was like all that you cared about. But like where you are now, looking back, it's probably not significant at all, really.
It's just a small part, isn't it? And they tell you that when you're at school, right? When you're doing your GCSEs or your first qualifications, they start to go, look, it is important, but it's not that, you know, it'll become a time where it gets superseded by something else. And that's definitely true, you know, and I wouldn't be where I am without that qualification. It's been an incredible thing to get, and actually I've just hit my 10 years qualified.
Congratulations.
Milestone. I don't know how I feel about it. But you know, so actually now I'm a fellow of the institute, not just you know, a member. So that sort of makes me go, oh wow,
certified.
I've achieved something else, but also, oh God, I'm old. You know, that's it. I'm on the slow decline.
Is it possible to get into that aspect of work without a qualification, a uni degree?
Yeah, so a good friend of mine works for a very large business, heading up their treasury function, like what they call cash and bank. So he deals with millions of pounds of cash payments every day. You know, paying suppliers, also sort of, you know, getting sales invoices, and he's responsible for that entire function. He started working in a cinema, and actually he, you know, got up through that job, ended up, you know, training up to be management, and so he did the whole career progression. And I think that much more now, you know, employers particularly are looking for different ways or internal programs to get people upskilled. You know, it's not necessarily a thing that you have to go to university anymore. You have to do a certain thing.
So he did it all without the debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clever.
And actually in accountancy, so when I was joined, they were sort of bringing in a new thing where actually they would train you in what's called AAT first, which is sort of a lower level accountancy qualification. And if you got through that, then they would take you straight from school, put you through that, and that would take 2 years. And then they would also then put you on the final pathway. Wow. So actually there were people much younger than me who were qualifying ahead of me because they'd actually just taken a different route. And they were excellent, you know, because they got all the training on the job.
So I think what I'm quite interested in, and I'm sure you two are as well, is that people like yourselves who've got into this role of chartered accountant, there's that traditional path where you'd stay in that for the rest of your life and then you just take your pension and retire as a chartered accountant. And that's kind of, I was a chartered accountant. You seem to have taken a different path and gone, I kind of want a bit more, or there's something else that I want from life. And you've gone down the path of becoming a CEO, as you said, which I think a lot of people think is quite daunting or scary. What was it that made you want to make that leap?
Wish I'd taken the path where I'm just going to drop 55. It's like, what a fool I've been. No, and that's the funny thing. I was never an accountant.
Yeah.
In kind of, and that's not really true, right? I've worked with lots of accountants who are very personable, great people. You know, obviously it's a stereotype.
Yeah.
Accountants are these boring, you know, bean counters. but I do believe that people do get attracted to jobs that kind of suit their personality. Yeah. You know, if you're going to be cabin crew, you've got to be quite, you know, against, not anti-routine, but, you know, you've got to be willing to kind of just work weird shifts and times and be a bit kind of transient. You know, that wouldn't suit me. I'm far too routine. And likewise, there are an end of accountants that are very, you know, routine focused, you know, structured, analytical, and that's why they're good. I was more at the commercial end of accountancy, and a lot of my clients used to say, well, you're not really an accountant, are you? But actually, really beneficial when you're an auditor, because they think they're your mate.
Oh, right?
So they used to tell me all this stuff, and I was like, it's really interesting. I was like, it's also not right. So I write that down. So it's good fun, actually. I used to really enjoy it. But so I did it for about 6 years all in. I moved from audit into corporate finance, which was sort of called the sexy end of accountancy, if there is such a thing.
Was that in the same company, or did you move for that?
Yeah. So, and I think it was after my first year, I sort of had a very blunt conversation and said, I'm not going to qualify and be an audit manager, by the way. So I want to know what kind of potential career path there is for me. And that's not typical. People don't generally do that in their first year. They sort of wait till they qualify to be like, oh, can we look at something? And I was like, I want to know what that is now. So I did that, and that kind of opened me up to a world of working with businesses and understanding how you get value into them. And I think in my career, I guess what I went through personally was a big change of what I was like as a person. So I think I did start off that very rigid, structured. I was goal oriented, so I wanted to get promoted. I wanted to be a partner. I was like, there's no reason why I can't do this job. I was looking at people thinking, seems easy enough to me. Like, how hard could it be? But actually, as I kind of went through it, I realized my face didn't really fit, and that I was a bit more, not maverick, but a bit more innovative, a bit more willing to question rules, tighten up processes, make things simpler, more efficient. And that was just like a natural, I was a troubleshooter, a problem solver.
Would you say you're quite proactive then, and like anything you found like there was problems, you were like, I need to solve that?
Yeah, and I always make a joke that people would say, oh, you know, it's, you know, you're so confident. And I was like, I'm not confident, I'm belligerent. Like, I'm almost like so stupid that I can't keep my mouth shut. I just, if I see something, I say what it is. They're like, well, why does that work like that? And always this kind of curiosity.
Yeah. So I think you need to be curious, because that always drives, I guess, change. Yeah. And a lot of people that aren't curious, or when a business or something like that doesn't have that curiosity, and things just stay the same, and a new person might come in and go, well, we were doing this at my place. It worked so much better. You guys are kind of years behind us. Yeah. So you have to have people like you, I guess, to make positive changes.
Right. And to fix problems.
Yeah. And so I didn't choose to be a CEO. It sort of happened by accident. You know, what ended up happening was that, you know, circumstantially, I trained during the recession. You know, I'd had a pay rise of about 500 quid a year, which was terrible back then, you know, for an accountant who was qualifying. You know, I was probably 10, 15 grand behind where I sort of felt I should have been paid. But ultimately, that was where we were. And it was tough times. And so I saw a really shiny job advertised in London that was about internal consulting for BT. And I was like, well, I've never worked for a really big firm. You know, that could be exciting. It might give me loads to do. And, you know, it just happened that it was going to double my salary overnight. So I thought, that sounds really cool. Like, I'm really interested in that.
And did you feel qualified enough for that post at the time? Or was it just like, I'll go for it, hopefully they give me it? Or were you like quite confident?
Bit of that.
Yeah.
pretty much just sort of thought, well, the job description reads like what I do and how I operate. And whilst I might not meet some of the, you know, qualification criteria, or I didn't go to the Red Brick University, or I didn't go to a big four accountancy firm, you know, it's good enough. And so I'm going to give it a go.
I think a lot of people might suffer in that position where they're looking and they see a role that comes up and they go, oh, I could do that, but there's probably someone better, so I'm not going to bother.
Such a bad mindset.
Imposter syndrome.
Or
is there ever
like
a point in your life where you have felt like you've had imposter syndrome?
Every day. No, and it does. In all honesty, it does. And I'm at the point now where, you know, I sit on boards. You know, I'm basically a professional director. You know, that's what I do. So, you know, it's all about governance, strategy, risk. And my first board role, I had attended a meeting and I thought, okay, yeah, this seems interesting. And they wanted an audit committee setting up, and I'm qualified to do that. So great stuff. And at my first meeting, there was a massive board fallout. Half the board resigned. And I it was so strange because I'd gone into that meeting thinking, I'm probably the youngest person here by a very long way. I perhaps, don't know the ins and outs of what's going to happen or what should happen. And very quickly I realised, actually, I'm the most qualified person in the room.
Yeah.
And right now, I am exactly placed, and my experience is precisely placed to fix this problem. Do I want to do it? Not quite sure. But here I am. I signed up to it, and so I felt like I had a duty to.
Yeah, and I think when you notice that and you believe in yourself, then you kind of get that confidence that you didn't know you had, and then you just build on it, really, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that most things are within your control, and that actually, luck plays a part, but you do create luck.
Yeah,
and my career has been about seeking and taking opportunity as kind of when it arises. So when these things have turned up where I've gone, oh, this job looks interesting, let's give it a go. When I got into BT, I did the role for a year, it was great. I kind of had a difficult boss. I was like, I'm not really sure I'm enjoying it, but they put me on kind of a mentoring kind of management track program. My mentor was like, we'll find you another role in the business. Like, this business is enormous. There's 120,000 people work here. Like, we'll find you something to do. And that's how I ended up being a HR program management office lead.
I think we had a guest
knowing nothing about either of those things,
We had a guest the other week who talked about imposter syndrome and how people always think, oh, they don't deserve or they shouldn't be in this position. But in reality, to get to that position, it's not just you that put yourself there, other people have, and they've believed in you. Like you said, they go, I think you'd be great at this, and you start doing it, but that's because other people have believed in you. So you can't be that much of an imposter.
You're not there solely on yourself. People have had to look at you and be like, I want you for this job.
Yeah.
Going back to talk about mentors, is having a mentor a big thing for you?
Yeah.
Do you still have mentors?
Absolutely. I think it's really important no matter what you do. And when I set up, so kind of I worked for BT for a few years. I then got very unhappy with kind of working for a big corporate. I found myself in the office one day, completely stressed out of my mind, almost kind of burst into tears. And I was like, this is not healthy. Like, I shouldn't, I'm kind of done with this. I don't need this anymore. And I resigned with nothing else to go to. And everyone was a bit like, well, what do you mean you don't have another job lined up? I just thought, well, I'm a qualified accountant. Like, I can find work somewhere, and if need be, I'll go and work at a pub. I'll go and put pints. It's not. I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. Then that's the issue. I think a lot of people think if they leave, then that's it. They're unemployed, or they won't find anything else, and their life will kind of end at that point.
I think it shows a belief within yourself that things will, with my capability, will sort themselves out.
Yeah, and I think, and also in a strange sort of way, unless you force yourself to make the change, it's very easy to not. It's very easy to go, when this, arbitrary set of criteria get met, I'll do it then. Or if that happens, and it's always the when, and there's never a good time for anything.
No.
So you've got to kind of push yourself. So I set up a business consultancy, when I was sort of in my very early 30s, and I thought, no one's going to believe me. Like, what am I doing? And very quickly, I built a very strong business, within a few months, because I'd done it before. I'd worked in those companies. I knew how they operated.
Yeah.
I had that skill.
And when you were transitioning from the accountancy role to this, like the first business you set up, was there any role models or influences or people that you kind of looked up to, or was it just people you'd worked with?
Yeah, I think I've always tried to seek grounded models, if you like, or role models. I like to call them real models.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, real people. And when I set up that business, it's lonely when you're a solo founder. The first thing I did was surround myself with other solo founders so that I could learn from them. And also because sometimes you need a good therapy session down the pub. You need to go, oh, this is all falling apart and I don't think it can work and I don't think I'm any good. For them to go, yeah, I did that last week, but I'm all right now. It's because you go through those waves. So mentoring, I think, is really important, and just that idea of kind of continuous learning. Like, I'm always trying to stay on top of, what's new, what am I missing, how can I improve my leadership, what can I do better?
And was there a defining moment when you left accountancy and you started the business where you're like, right, that's the moment I'm changing, this is it, I'm kind of moving away from my old job?
Yeah, I think when I left BT, I think that was it. There was definitely a sense of there's no turning back here. You know, I definitely want to work for myself. And strangely, that actually came from my colleagues at BT. So I was in a really brilliant leadership team. You know, had a boss that was really difficult to work with, and I just thought, I can't do the micromanaging. It's just not my style. I need autonomy. And when I'd handed in my notice, almost each of them individually had come to say to me, why aren't you working for yourself? Like, you're so much better than this job. You know, you could be a CEO. And I kind of thought, that's bonkers. Like, what are you talking about? And I guess that kind of planted a seed in me, because then that was like an idea that I'd not really had before. A little bit like, oh, perhaps I can be an accountant. You know, that was on my list of no.
Yeah.
So I was open to going, could I be a CEO? Like, what would that look like? And it's really easy when you start your own business, because you can call yourself a CEO.
Yeah.
Just do it. And then what's happened then is over time, then I've then become a CEO. You know, I've actually gone and got the skills that I need.
I think in relation to that, one of our previous guests said all he needed to start his business was £100, and he just said that he just gave himself a title. Didn't even know the title existed. He was like, I'm just going to be a negotiator or a consultant negotiator. Didn't even know that was such a thing as such. And was just like, right, give myself that title. I'm a CEO of my own business, £100, and he just went from there. And looking back on it now, he's obviously done quite well. So I think it's quite a similar mindset that you've had, and it's just been like, this is what I am. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it 100%, and it's taken me to the moon. So hopefully,
I think what I realised at that point was that careers and jobs now, you know, the idea of having a job for life had long gone before I entered the world of work. You know, that's been disappearing more and more. I think that it's about skill and, you know, experience and just experiencing different disciplines. Because actually, when you say, oh, you're a CEO, you know, there's a difference between being the CEO of a FTSE 50 company and being the CEO of a startup. You know, those are two vastly different skill sets and different sets of experience. The reality for me is, having become a CEO and having had the kind of experience I have in my career, actually, I understand about marketing strategy. I understand about people strategy. I can do finance. You know, so actually, I dip in and out of all sorts of parts of the business in a small business.
So that kind of experience you got from being an accountant and working in these other jobs has kind of set you up perfectly to kind of start up a small business and be able to do things and kind of work out your strengths and weaknesses then. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that what I did when I set up my consulting business was I positioned it as almost a skill set rather than I'm offering this service. Because I kind of had this idea that if I call myself a consultant, I just sound like a prat. Like, I sound like someone who's going to come and tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And am I really old enough to do that? And so I was like, I don't think I am a consultant. I was like, I think I'm a business advisor. You know, I'm going to come in and fix your problems. And so actually, what problems can I fix? And that's where it started to emerge from. I said, actually, I can do risk management, I can do HR, I can do finance, you know, I can do systems and processes. So I had all this experience.
So that was one business. Have you done more than one?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many have you
tried?
Yeah. How many have you tried? Because obviously a lot of people, entrepreneurs, they start multiple businesses and they fail, and then they find the one that works for them.
Right.
And where are you up to now?
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess what I've got now is a bit of a portfolio career. So as part of setting up the consultancy, I wanted to also become a non-exec director and sort of to keep my hand in other businesses and advise, you know, at a board level where I don't have to do the work. You know, that's kind of, I quite enjoy that sort of thinking and helping people grow in that way. So I got my first role as a non-exec with a credit union. So that was financial services, very different. What I've then done now is I sit on the board of an e-commerce startup as a sort of non-exec, and I'm also advisor to a social digital marketing agency, which also has a second company that measures social value in ESG. So that's completely different again. So that's kind of like my board level appointments. And then I still run my consultancy. And off the back of some work I did there, I connected with an old client from when I was an accountant. We met up. She had a business idea and sort of said, listen, I've got this mad business idea, but I need a CEO. She's like, I need someone to co-found it with me because I don't have that skill set. She's like, I'm the ideas person here. She's like, I'm not the executor. She's like, but you are the executor. So that's my Nexus. And that's still going. So that's 5 years in.
Oh, nice.
It's been a hell of a 5 years to try and start a business.
I bet.
And what we're doing is quite complicated. So
I was going to say, I've got some notes on my Nexus here. I was going to ask.
Find out about it.
I think the first thing I've got is that your kind of goal is to help businesses grow and help entrepreneurs source investments for startups. Is that kind of the main?
So I think the passion came obviously from having worked in lots of businesses when I was an accountant and then having set up my own. You know, this kind of support for early stage business, it's very fragmented. There's lots out there. It's really hard to navigate and it's very hard to do successfully. So, you know, there's this sort of horrible stat about 90% of, you know, any new business will fail within the first sort of 3 to 5 years, you know, and they just churn. And that's not a bad thing because you're right, failure is good. We learn from failure. So we should have a level of failure, but it never really moves from 90% and we think that's too high. So what we saw was a problem at the kind of investment end of startups. Really hard to kind of put your finger on what you should invest or shouldn't invest in. So investors find it hard to measure their risk, and entrepreneurs find it hard to demonstrate their capability. We said, well, can we do something about that? Can we create digital tools that instead of this very, very biased process of like, let's meet and have a handshake, and if I like you, I might give you some money. Or if my mate told me about you, I'll give you some money, into actually something a bit more data-driven. So that was the concept.
You can kind of prove what you've got, the skills you've got, and they can look and say, oh, I like that. I don't have to just kind of guess by having that conversation in the pub.
Right, yeah. Because there's a huge problem in investment in that, you know, women founders don't get funded, black founders don't get funded. It's just an inherent systemic bias, and we can't really overcome that unless we change the process. So we're trying to kind of, it's a big job to go and try and change a whole industry, especially while we've been having, you know, COVID, economic shocks and everything else. So, you know, will that survive or will it fail?
I guess when everything's put in on sheets of data and there's evidence to prove that someone is worth the funding,
right?
Doesn't matter what skin color they are or what gender they are. It's performance
proven
based
facts
at the end of the day, isn't it?
So that's it.
So if us three came to you and we started a business and we said, look, we want a profile and we want investment, how would you go about it?
Yeah, so we've built a couple of digital tools basically to help you kind of self-learn. So one is what we call the Entrepreneur Skills Index. So actually it's a game. So you can download an app, run a little coffee shop, looks dead simple. It's really hard because we designed it. But what we're actually measuring for is not, you know, whether you can make a profit or whether you understand, you know, how to make sales. We're looking at actually, do you possess the personality attributes that an entrepreneur we would expect to find? So how is your calculated decision making? You know, are you kind of, do you seek or, you know, autonomy or goals, you know, so we get you to make lots of decisions in the game, and from those decisions we can measure your personality basically. And that's about giving you then an understanding of what do I as an entrepreneur then do, because actually you're one part of it, the business idea is another, and then also the industry in which you operate in is another one. So
do you have like a bank of investors for each industry then that you kind of connect people with? Or like, say we set up a business and we want to start a clothing brand or something, do you then know investors, or would they just contact you? How does it work? Yeah,
so at the moment what we have from the investor side is a kind of proof of concept matchmaking platform. So, you know, the Tinder for investors is often what people will say, and I think it's right. You know, that sort of dating analogy is a good one, because it's about kind of saying, yeah, on paper you might have the criteria that fit together. Actually, you don't know until you go on a few dates as to whether you're actually
that's right for them.
Exactly.
Is it just Manchester companies, or is it nationally? Is it internationally?
Yeah,
How
so
far have
we're
you spread at the
UK
moment?
focused at the
UK
moment,
focused.
yeah, and we're trying to work in kind of the Northwest and the Midlands. So my co-founder's from the Midlands, and so we cover both of those patches, which is, other than probably Scotland, it is a big bulk of everything that happens outside of London. Although you've got loads of tech clusters popping up in you know, Bristol and Leeds and this sort of stuff. So I think there's a big ambition and a drive at the moment to get money outside of London, and we're very passionate about, you know, getting that to happen.
Yes, yeah.
Starting businesses kind of in the rest of the country.
Is obviously these days everything is becoming more and more online. Do you have an office? Do you like to see the people who work for your company in person? Or is everything online?
Yeah, we're all online. So our CTO is based in London. So there's only the three of us. You know, it's a very small team. Because actually, you don't need a big team to do that kind of stuff at the moment. So you know, it's all around partnerships and you know, and what we're not doing is, I suppose, you know, running Google ads to attract entrepreneurs. We go to accelerators or incubators or places where entrepreneurs are already seeking support, where we can add a bit more value to them.
That's what I was going to ask next, is how do you find the entrepreneurs, or how would you get them to come to you? Like, what would you offer different to an entrepreneur who's looking for an investment? And if they were looking for investment, how would they know to find you, I guess?
Yeah, because at the moment, you know, the way investment works, and although, you know, we've got some pretty big gutsy vision about, you know, how we want to change the process, ultimately you've got to work with what's there first. So, you know, if that's the way investors like to do their investment, we're not going to try and change that. What we are going to try and do is help the entrepreneurs understand a bit more about themselves so they can be what we call investment ready. So investment ready at the moment often means you need to have a pitch deck, a business plan, you know, some financial forecasts. You know, with AI, I think it's going to be very hard to tell lots of these businesses apart, because actually it will be very easy not to fabricate, but to do something that's relatively high quality quite quickly. And actually investors are looking at it and going, I don't really know how to tell these apart. So the biggest challenge for investors at the moment is they go through thousands of these pitch decks every year. They're bombarded with them, and they can't sift them fast enough. So what we want to try and do is help entrepreneurs actually get under the skin of what they bring to that business and why they will be good for it. Or if they're not going to be, how are they going to get over that barrier? Because it's sort of it's a funny thing when you start a business, because everyone has to do everything, and actually we're not good at everything. You know, inherently we're all
Find what you're good at.
Exactly. And you won't be the CEO of your startup.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people
beyond a certain time, so you should be planning for that.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people like say that they want to start a business and they try and do everything, and then they realize they might be really good at management, but all the other things they're rubbish at, and then they have to employ people that are better at that thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you go about spreading awareness of My Nexus? Because obviously you've said it's been about 5 years now since you started, and I think it was at uni about 4 years ago, 3 years ago.
You heard about it there, didn't you?
Do you look at opportunities like going to speak to the next generation of people who do business degrees, the next generation of businessmen, as an opportunity to spread awareness of your company? Is that why you would do something like that? But also for personal gain, as in experience of talking to people and gaining confidence?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking to people, and I'm because I'm particularly passionate about entrepreneurship. You know, I find that easy. Our kind of strategy, I suppose, is to target that education sector. So actually looking at the universities, the tech hubs, because most universities will have a kind of a spin out division or entrepreneurial support of some form. They find it very hard to give that support consistently. And also there's a really great stat around something like, I think it's a third of undergraduates start a business. So that's clearly more people than are, you know, studying business. So there are people who might be doing art or English or anything else that actually are doing something entrepreneurial on the side. And they're now trying to tap into how do we get the support to those people. So actually universities are very well placed because they're already trying to do that. And there's a lot of money being thrown at kind of government priorities over making sure that that skill continues and that, you know, we can transition these start and scale ups into great businesses, because actually their contribution to the UK economy is wild.
Mm.
Scale ups contribute
I guess
massives.
From what I'm a bit nosy about and what I'm a bit interested in, so you're the middleman really in a basic term between entrepreneurs and investors. How do you monetize it? How do you guys profit off it? Like what do you gain from it?
So part of what we're very passionate about is not fleecing people. And often what happens in the investment world today is because of that handshake or introduction, and because that's the way it all works, it's all kickbacks. So I might get 5% for introducing someone that then goes on to get an investment, which is bad, because what it also does is it makes people protect their own contacts. So it's not as open a market.
Becomes quite cliquey and niche.
Yeah. And then that just feeds the bias, right? Because we're all still investing in the same rubbish, so it doesn't make any difference to anyone's performance.
Yeah.
It's a numbers game. In terms of our monetization strategy, we are a kind of software as a service. We charge institutions and accelerators, incubators to use the tools, but actually they get a nice kind of back of house software where they can put 40 people through the tool and then see all of the metrics across their program, so they can measure actually how their program's performing and whether those people, where they should target the support to.
So it seems like a good investment for them then as well.
Right. Yeah.
So you feel like you're not cutting anyone short really.
Is there obviously Manchester, I like to call it the London of the North, and I feel like it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more businesses, more and more office blocks. Is there competition? Have you got businesses that are doing similar things to you? And I guess what
makes you better?
What makes you better? What do you think sets you apart?
Because more so. That's it. That's the only answer I've got. No, you did right. It's a great question, because I would be scared if there weren't competitors.
There weren't.
Yeah, because then it should be a bit like, well, why? Why is this so easy? If there aren't people operating in your sphere, then you're doing it wrong. So competition's good. It's healthy. Yeah. No one's doing exactly what we're doing. There's lots of tools out there around. If you upload your pitch deck to us, we can send it out to 100,000 investors. It's still a scattergun approach. There are people trying to use AI to predict whether startups will fail or not based on all kinds of information, whether it's your bank statements or what you've been posting on your social media for the last 20 years. And allegedly, they're going to predict the future. I think it's bollocks. Yeah. Basically,
I think there's too many.
So many missed opportunities potentially from that. Like someone could be written off that, could have all the potential to potentially start a really good business, but just because of something that an AI has picked up, they're almost like written off just from that.
The one thing that's certain in business is people will fail, and people will fail who are good because they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they've got this.
Are you a true believer in that?
Yeah,
right place, right time.
Yeah, because that's everything. That's why people who have failed eventually have success.
Yeah.
Part of it's the tenacity. It's because if you do it enough times, one of them will go right.
Yeah.
But also it's about, if you happen to be in that industry when it's succeeding and you hit it at the right time and you get to your customers and you've got the right resources, great. If I gave you £1 billion and said, go and start a business, you'd probably make it work eventually.
I guess, again, me being nosy, I'm interested. You said you've got the CEO business, but you do the other stuff as well. How do you manage your time? What do you kind of put? How would you break it down?
Calendar.
Yeah, per week.
Oh, yeah.
Because it sounds like you've got about 6 jobs.
I do.
Maybe 7.
I used to say that. I was like, I've got people what do you do? And I'm like, I have 7 full-time jobs. The short answer is by being efficient. I tend to try, and I'm very good, I guess, at looking at, when my energy is best. So, generally speaking, I'm a morning person. So, that's when I have my best ideas. If I'm struggling and it's a bit late at night, I might go to sleep because actually I'll wake up and I'll know the answer. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about just careful planning, really. I think there isn't anything more I can say because there's lots of things out there that people will say, oh, you can use this time management technique or you can do that thing. I think people instinctively know what works for them.
Everyone's different.
Yeah. I think one of the big things about being efficient is also delegating case workload. And I feel that's something I struggle with sometimes at work. I'll be like, I'm just going to do this because no one else is going to want to do it. But if I were to say, and it sometimes might make me finish late, whereas if I was just honest and frank with someone and I just said, can you do this, please? They wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
So I guess for you, obviously being a CEO and having 7 jobs, being able to delegate workload must be really important.
Yes, and also anticipating, and this is where, having worked as a kind of program and project manager is very good. So anticipating when, someone else is going to need to do some work on something, and trying to, in your mind, kind of go, well, actually, I need to get that to them now, because if I don't get it to them now, then they won't have it back in time for me to be able to achieve this thing. And so just kind of working it back on what's the biggest priority. I would actually say the biggest thing that anyone can do to manage their time is use the word no.
Yeah. People are scared, aren't they?
I'm not very good at doing that.
Yeah. And also I think I've become, I'm less FOMO than I used to be. I used to be very much like, I want to try and do everything, and everything's an opportunity. What you very quickly learn is that you can only do so much. And so actually what you should be doing is thinking, is this the best opportunity? What am I giving up by saying yes to this? And if that's the potential for something else, then it's like, no, I'm not going to do that actually. And I'm confident in that, and I'm comfortable with it. I'm not going to think, I should have done that. And so I've said no.
Yeah.
So that's it now.
So when you're doing this time management and you break down your weeks, what's like a typical day for you? I guess typical is probably not the right word to use because there might not be a typical day, but standard week from Monday to Friday, even weekends, to be honest, is there like certain things you're always going to have to do, or is it always different?
I mean, there's always what I would call recurring admin, keeping on top of the accounts, doing the finances, running the payroll, that sort of stuff. So there's always jobs that are kind of scheduled.
Yeah.
I would say the next layer for me then usually is, and I try to think about meetings and the tasks that I do by maturity. And what I mean by that is, because I'm working with lots of businesses and projects that are at different stages, I try to make sure that what I have in my week or my day is a mix of those things. So what I don't want to be doing is 10 meetings in one day that are all about potential new work, because actually that kind of brain effort that you need to sit and think about, okay, tell me about your business, can I help, can I not help, then writing that up into some form of proposal or offer, that I only want to do a couple of those a week maybe, versus if I've got a workshop that I need to deliver, or we need to have a working session on something, I maybe want a couple of those. So I try to balance out the different types of work that I've got to do so that I don't get kind of flatlined in terms of what I'm trying to deliver, or it takes up my brain capacity. You
have to be quite good at prioritization then, choosing what's going to fit you best that day, really.
Yeah. And also, being upfront with people and saying, I can't do that for then, but also, you want it now. Why? What's the driver for that? Do I actually just need to do some emotional management with the people that I'm working with to say, it probably isn't necessary. It might feel urgent, but the reality is it can wait, and so if we do that next week, it'll be a much better quality output than if we try and force it in. And then people go, oh, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm comfortable with it now.
So now you've been doing this job for, My Nexus anyway, for 5 years, was it you said? What's the best bit of it for you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think anyone's ever really asked me that before. The best bit, I think I really enjoy going and speaking to customers and people who use the products. I think, and I think most business owners will say the same thing. I think it's that's what gives you the validation, the get out of bed stuff, when someone says, tool's amazing, I used it the other week, this is what the
someone's actually
was.
Using something that you've produced.
Right, exactly. And then they're like, I totally get it now, this has really helped me do these things, or I'm going to go and take away and do something. And that you think, yeah, that's awesome. I sort of feel like, well, then what we're doing is working. And also it's great feedback. I love getting feedback, whether it's good or bad, everything's an opportunity for improvement.
Helps you grow.
Yeah. Talking about sort of feedback, obviously it can be positive, it can be negative. And talking about what Leo just asked, what let's talk about failure, because obviously you said earlier, there's obviously to success comes with a lot of failure, and it can take 10 fails before you get that success. What was the most recent failure that you think you've had?
I don't know if I could pull something specific out. I think.
Is there any recent time where you've been like,
it's not working?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. We have that because we're solving creative problems.
Yeah.
And I think if you take My Nexus as an example, people say, "Oh, it's been running 5 years. That's really great. You're successful." And I'm like, "Yeah, and it could all end tomorrow. If it all goes wrong, who knows?" So we don't sort of trust that that's always going to be there. We always work to fight for it. So people would say, "Oh, you haven't failed yet," and I'm like, "No, we fail in that business constantly. That's why it's taken us 5 years to get to this point, because during that time we've had a series of failures where we've tried something and it's not worked, or we've sort of got so far down the road with a potential partner and we think it's going to be great, and then something else falls out, or it changes. The wind changes and everything moves in a different direction. So we've got to start again, and so." Those kind of things, I suppose, in a strange way, are always happening. We're always missing the mark on something, and going, "Oh yeah, we could have done that," and then we learn from it.
And then, since being a CEO, I guess no one really knows what it's going to be like until you're doing it. But is there anything like blatantly obvious where you've been in the role and you're like, "Oh, I never knew I'd be doing that," or any funny stories, positions you've got yourself into where you're like, "I had no idea I'd be doing this"?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question, because when I was at BT and I got that sort of role in kind of HR program management, I didn't know anything about it, and it was probably the first time I'd ever been in a role where it was mine to create. It was almost like I needed to learn it, and then kind of I had the space to sort of spread my wings a little bit and flex, skill muscles that I didn't know if I had or not. I was sort of just trying stuff out and seeing what worked. And I think that for anyone that's kind of doing any kind of job in any industry, sometimes you can feel a bit of a slave to the system. Like, I must operate within this box. And what I've always strived to do in my career is, step outside that box, just take on the responsibility. The best career advice I ever got when I was trying to become a manager, and I think I wanted it so desperate, I must have been really irritating. And they were like, "Stop asking for permission to be the manager, be the manager."
Yeah.
And it was like penny dropped, and I was like, right, you're only going to promote me if I embody all the things that you want to see. Yeah. It's not about ticking a list or going, well, how do I, I've done all those things. So is that, am I a manager
responsibility
now?
Into your own hands.
Yeah. And actually it was a behavioral thing. It wasn't an experience thing. It was like if the manager behaves like this is how you become one. You just act in the right way. And so, like, those funny things about, getting yourselves into situations, or, what have I ended up doing as a CEO that I perhaps wasn't expecting?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I've sat on lots of boards and I've thought, am I going mad? When you're in a meeting, you think, am I missing something here?
Yeah.
Have I stepped into the wrong meeting? Because I feel like everyone's talking a different language, and I've got no idea what people are talking about at all. And I'm like, what are we even? And I'm a bit like.
And then when you put your input in, you're just like, oh my god.
Oh, I'm very northern about it. Yeah. I just kind of go, right, someone's gonna have to speak to me like in English, because. I feel very stupid right now, but if I don't put my hands up and say that, like, you're just going to keep talking.
You have to ask questions. It's so important to ask questions. I'd say I'm pretty good at asking questions. If I don't know what someone's telling me, I'll just ask them to tell me.
I think some people find it hard. Some people find it hard, though, don't they? They don't like, if they don't know something, they're like, well, I don't want to recognise I don't know it, because then they might think I'm stupid. Or if I suddenly say, oh, I don't get what you're talking about, they're like, well, you should know that. So.
Silly example, I suppose, but I was at a board meeting the other day and we were talking about credit control, which sounds really dull. Well, they're basically like, we've got some older debt, people aren't paying us. It's really common at the moment, stuff is hard. People are managing their cash flow a little bit kind of naughty. And we were having a conversation. They basically said, oh, we don't really want to, kind of ask too much because we feel bad for asking. And you're like, yeah, because no one likes asking people for money.
Yeah.
I was like, but have you thought about it from the other side, which is what it feels like to be asked for money that you owe someone? It's like, people are guilty as heck, you know. And so if you're really nice about it and you do it with a smile and you do it a lot, like they start to feel awful.
Yeah.
I was like, so actually you're looking at it the wrong way. You know, you're kind of coming at it from that wrong position. And I think that lots of people do that in business, in you know, all their careers, out of sort of a misplaced fear or not feeling like they're in control. And actually you've got loads, you know, you start thinking about what the other person's thinking or what they're trying to do, what's their goal or agenda. You know, that's how you get promoted, is going, why would you promote me? What is it you need? So how can I be that?
Yeah.
So that's what you do.
No, it's so true. I think it's the right time in the podcast to get a bit more deep, and we'll dive into those questions, a bit more meaning of life kind of questions. I think Eddie's written a few here.
So we've only got 4 left now, but I'll have to think of some more ones in it.
Right, just pick one out, James.
Just pick one. And
just the one. Okay. I'll have a look at that one.
You can just read it out. Let us know what it
says. It's at the top
says.
of the page, so it's probably one of the good ones.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing. Okay.
Yeah, the first one.
Oh, the question is, do you have a 5-year plan?
Oh.
Ooh, great question. I used to. Back in the early part of my career, I was that guy. I was the 5-year plan man.
You said you were very organised and
right, and I was trying to achieve goals, and I wanted to be, you know, partner or whatever, and you know, I wanted the White House and the picket fence, and actually over time you just go, none of that stuff matters. I don't care about any of it. So my 5-year plan really only revolves around making sure I've got financial stability in my old age. Probably, I'm in a. Because you would think, being an accountant, you know, you said right at the beginning about, you know, doing the route where you just go and collect your pension probably at 55, you know, because they've usually made a decent amount of money by then.
Yeah.
My pension's tiny. I've spent all of my savings and money on building my business and doing that, and now I'm at the point where I'm like, I need a return. I need this to start paying out, otherwise I'm going to be working forever. But I imagine that I will probably always be in some form of work, you know, board advisory, whatever it is, because
that's your personality.
I can't imagine I would ever not want to. I think it would just be about how it fits in my life.
I think it's so true, like, especially with us as physios
who are sort of own their own businesses and entrepreneurs, because they're so passionate about work that it's hard for them to ever let go.
Switch it off.
Because I think maybe this is what you're about to say, because as physios we work in sort of because we're not in the sort of corporate sort of entrepreneur role. We're structured, our days are very the same, sort of same time every day, whereas with you, I mean, your hours there's no such thing as hours for you, really, is there? It's you're always working, you're always prepared to pick up the phone, and I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, that'll never disappear.
It's just built into them. Well, what I was going to say is, as physios, we spend a lot of our time convincing people who are elderly or who are retired age to kind of keep doing things. Yeah. Whereas someone like you, I feel like it's just built in that you will just carry on doing things, because sitting at home and just watching telly just isn't part of like what makes you feel like human. Yeah,
and there's something about, you know, stability and security and routine but like lifestyle, I guess, and I think, you know, COVID's been great in a way, because I think it's really changed the perception on, you know, how work and life fit together. But I'm also, you know, I guess typically my generation, that sounds awful. That you know, we're a little bit more work and life are one and the same. So actually, just from a point of view of like age, there's a definite thing of, actually most of us are about how we blend those together, like people at my age, as opposed to how we separate them, which are kind of the generations that comes kind of before and after. So it's kind of, I'm always kind of fascinated by that kind of stuff as well, like the anthropology of it.
I guess the question leading on from that then is, your 80-year-old self sat in your armchair, kind of looking back at your life. Still working. Still working. How would you have defined success in your eyes? At what point would you ever say, I've kind of achieved success now? Or would you think that's ever possible?
So I think I've already achieved success. Like I feel like I am doing the things in my life that I want to be doing. Yeah. That's really important.
That's success.
And actually what I did in my early career was I swapped out that word for happiness instead. because it's a fool's errand to chase success. What does it mean? You know, like you say,
it's very subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, and also I think success has a connotation of othering. You know, actually that's about what it means to other people. It's about, you know, why am I pushing so hard? Actually, it's because I'm trying to make my parents happy. You know, I'm trying to prove something, or just want them to love me a little bit more. You know, like actually it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
you know, it's about what you want and what will bring you joy.
I read on the website on My Nexus that success was to do with cash, capability and capacity. So I guess in that sense, success is a bit different to your own personal success.
I guess it's the same, because we talk about success in that way of like what business success is. If you want your business to achieve, you know, its goals, then that's what you need. You need some cash, you need some capacity and some capability, you know, and I suppose personal life is not much different. You know, how much money do you need to be happy? You know, can you do the things you want to do? Are you skilled enough to do them? And if not, can you learn? You know, and also then have you got the time? You know, and I think these are the things that make people sad. It's things going, I haven't got the time to do the things I want, or I can't afford to, or I'm not able to.
So true. I've never thought about it that way.
Sorry. What would you say? I think this thing interests me is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone looking at starting a business, what would that, from your experience, what would that advice be?
This is going to be funny. Get an accountant. Businesses hate doing the finance. So it's something I've encountered right throughout my career. Entrepreneurs inherently are ideas people. You're about your subject matter. You're about your business idea. And they look at the numbers sometimes, and if they're very fortunate and they're gifted and they're great at maths and stuff, they'll be on top of them. Most aren't. You know, I've helped businesses where I've gone in and found that actually they're not even VAT registered and they should be, and they owe the government like 100 grand. Oh, no. and they look at you like, oh my goodness, how could we have not done that? And it's like, but you don't know what you don't know. And every single person without fail who I talk to who's been through that struggle will say, the first thing I do in my business is I make sure the finances are on point.
Yeah.
Because it's those, knowing your numbers means you can make investment decisions. You can make decisions about what to do in your business. If you don't know if you've got enough cash coming in, you can't.
Yeah.
Or you make bad decisions because you're overextending yourself. So actually just having that kind of keeping your eye on the finances means you understand profitability. You're on top of whether things are working. Numbers get there because people put them there. So actually it's all about your operation and whether it's working well. The numbers aren't, you know, they're an output. They're not a kind of a thing to master, if you like, in that way.
So true. And then what I'm interested in, because you're going into your 40s and 50s soon.
Oh God, thank you. Wow.
That's rude.
No, we're all getting there slowly. We're all getting there.
We're all dying, right?
Exactly, we're all dying slowly. So
if you want to leave now, you can. If you're pissed off, we understand.
So before you die, I guess.
Responsibility for him.
Before you die, what kind of keeps motivating you to carry on? Is there anything in particular?
Before it makes me sound like I'm on
my
last legs.
5 years left.
Like I'm off for the glue. I think, you know, as I said in my previous answer, I guess because I approach my life and my career about, you know, what brings you joy, what do you like doing, what are you passionate about, I think as long as I'm doing that stuff, you know, I'm happy. I can die tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I hope not. And I hope you don't know something I don't. You know, I don't think there's anything I want to particularly achieve. You know, I don't want a hospital named after me or anything. You know, I'm not kind of chasing those goals.
That's quite a nice position to be in, because it's not like there's nothing that's, you can then be like, I need this, because I think people that chase things often reach them and then go, actually it's not as good as it seems, or
why am I doing it?
Yeah, what's the purpose of it? Yeah. So I think it's nice to be like, well, I'm happy where I am now and I'll carry on as I am, and whatever happens, which is, like you say, I think it's the best way to live, because you're not chasing things really.
Introspective kind of review of what motivates you, I think, is one of the most powerful things anyone can do, because it really does just kind of make you question everything from why do I live where I live to, you know, why do I have the friends I do? And I've seen people who've gone through that kind of process and then sort of just really changed their lives because they've thought, yeah, actually, I waste so much energy and time in things that I don't even enjoy, but I feel like I have to. And actually, you don't.
Yeah.
You can choose anything you want.
Yeah, that's what I have to keep telling my girlfriend when she's revising. I'm going, you're choosing to do this. And she's going, I know, but it's stressful. I'm like, yeah, but you could always quit. And she's like, but I don't want to. So, well, there you go. That's your motivation.
There it is.
There's still something, even though you're hating every second of the revision, that's making you carry on.
I've definitely been there. And you're right. And you go, stop your moaning.
Yeah.
Like, you just got to suck it up and get on with it. Yeah.
Have you guys got any other questions before I ask the final question?
No, I think it's been really informative. I've really enjoyed it.
I've loved it. No, I'm good.
So the last question, again, going back to the first question really, is if you look back when you were kind of finishing school at where you are now currently, and are you proud of the man you are and the position you're in?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think anyone who sits here and tells you otherwise is lying. Because I think most people do, that's kind of an inherent part of life that I think if you're always kind of moving forward, then you're always a better version of yourself tomorrow than you were today.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to live my life that way anyway. So yeah, I'm very happy with where I am today, and I'm excited for the future because I don't know what it's going to bring, but I'm open to that opportunity or it taking a completely different direction.
Proud that you didn't do biology.
Man, I can't imagine what I would have been like if I'd have been a scientist. I'd have probably invented something amazing by now. I'd probably be super rich, but it's just not in me. It's not happening.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really, really appreciate it.
Is there anything you want to us to put the link in the description to, or anything, or just your website? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll supply all the websites to everything that I do.
Yeah, we'll put James's links in and for My Nexus as well. So if there's any entrepreneurs looking for that investment connection, we can give you that details. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching or listening. If you're watching on YouTube, could you please subscribe or like the video? That'd be really helpful. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, if you could leave us a follow or any feedback in the comments below would be great. If you're watching and you'd like to get involved and have a conversation like this with us, just kind of relaxed conversation about what you do, how you got there, a bit of an interrogation, but hopefully nothing too invasive. But yeah, it's been really, really good conversation, and I hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. And if you keep coming back for more, maybe you'll learn stuff like we do and be better people and be more happy and more successful and be more content. Definitely. So yeah, that's the goal. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.